Welcome, everybody. Apologies for the slight delay. One of our panelists had some tech issues getting on, as probably everyone is experienced with by this point. So we might go a little bit over in the hour today, but the recording will be made available to all registrants. So you'll still be able to see the whole talk, even if you have to log off for another meeting right at 3 p.m. Or whenever the hour is in your time zone. So we're going to have a quick introduction from the president of NYCMER, Kira Lax.
Hi, everyone. We're very excited that you could join us for a panel discussion today on ethical remote internships. As Sheridan mentioned, my name is Kira Lax. I'm the current president of NYCMER, but in my full-time position, I'm the assistant director of college events at Teachers College, Columbia University, where some of you may have explored during previous annual NYCMER conferences. I want to first be sure to thank our panelists for joining us this afternoon, with a special acknowledgement going out to our NYCMER secretary and peer group liaison, Sierra Van Ryck deGroot, for organizing this event. And I hope she's okay with me singing her praises for just a moment. So towards the end of our past NYCMER programming year, Sierra took the initiative to create a spreadsheet of virtual internship opportunities for the summer, which was then picked up by the Museum Studies Network of AAM and made into a joint survey to share widely. And it was so well received that a fall internship form has been created and disseminated, and you too can take part in the survey, which will be included in the webinar chat box. And you should also receive a link to view the current fall internship spreadsheet. So we'll hope you'll continue to contribute and share this very valuable resource with your networks. Aptly enough, Sierra was also NYCMER's 2018 intern. So I wanted to take this time to provide a quick plug, as NYCMER is seeking an intern for the 2020-2021 programming season. This position is a fantastic networking opportunity for anyone looking to enter or grow in the field of museum education. The intern will work with members of the NYCMER board and will take an active role in planning and organizing the NYCMER annual conference, as well as assisting with special projects. And there's still time to apply. Applications are due at the end of the day on Tuesday, September 1st. There are also plenty of other ways to get involved with NYCMER, the NYCMER community. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out our website at nycmer.org or visit us at our virtual meet and greet, which is taking place next month. More information coming to an inbox near you soon. Now it's my pleasure to hand the virtual mic back over to Sheridan Small, the Director of Education at the Dumbarton House in Washington, D.C., who will be moderating this conversation. So a warm welcome and thanks to Sheridan.
Thank you so much, Kira, and thank you to NYCMER as well for hosting this webinar. So we have 2 interns and 2 intern supervisors on with us today. So we're really lucky to get both aspects of those perspectives on the internship programs. And so to start with Kat Pesigan, Kat is a student at the University of Washington completing a master's in museology with a focus in museum education and social justice. They just finished a remote internship at the Peoria Playhouse Children's Museum in Peoria, Illinois. As the education intern, they created educational resources for educators in the community and collaborated with interns and the director on ongoing educational programming throughout the summer. They hope to utilize the experiences they've had in the remote internship to influence their work in a future museum education career. Our other intern, Maya Rodgers, is a student at Ithaca College, where she is finishing up her final semester studying communication management and design. She just finished a remote internship at Poster House this summer. As the evaluation intern for the first cohort of Poster House interns, she worked on creating evaluation methods for the museum's College Night series and collaborated with the other interns to plan programming for this upcoming academic year's events. She hopes to take the skills she's learned through her remote internship into the next steps in finding her dream job as a graphic designer at a museum. Our first supervisor is Marne Bariso. She's been working in the field of education, museum education, for more than 25 years. She oversees the general volunteer program at the Chicago History Museum and spends most of her time training and supervising the volunteer gallery interpreters. Additionally, she coordinates the Chicago History Museum's internship program and has probably conducted 800 exit interviews with interns who have contributed to the museum's projects during the past 3 decades. Our second supervisor is Daniel Piccaro. Daniel Pecoraro is an education program coordinator at the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, the leading nonprofit organization dedicated to K-12 history education, while also serving the general public and chartered by New York State as a museum. At the Institute, he is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the affiliate school program, a network of over 27,000 K-12 schools worldwide, and coordinates monthly offerings to teachers along with a series of essay contests, which have served grades 2 through 12. In addition, he supervises the Institute's internship program for high school and college students and helps coordinate over 24 Gilder Lehrman teacher seminars each summer. So thank you to you all for joining us today. We're so glad to be able to get your expertise on your experiences with remote internships. So we're going to cover a lot of topics today, the first being recruiting and interviewing. So Marne, I'd like to start with you. After hosting an intern, both as a mentor and as a supervisor, what do you see as particularly important skills that a remote intern should have?
I think research skills are important. Remote interns are probably not going to be interacting with our visitors, with the public, as much as they would be if they were on site. So whether it's being able to research for an exhibition content, or in the case of the intern I supervised, she researched information about paid internships and virtual tours, what's going on out there. And another task that a remote intern could do is perhaps making phone calls, cleaning up a mailing list, for example. So the ability to have conversations. So I think it's useful to think about how to assess those kinds of skills during an interview.
Thank you so much, Marne. Daniel, would you like to add to that quickly?
I think the biggest thing as well, along with the research skills, that I think is key for an internship, whether it's remote or in person, is flexibility and the ability to jump between different projects. Organization is key as well. And lastly, communication, being able to let folks know in terms of supervisors and other folks on your team, know where you are on different work you're working on over the course of the summer, and also what help you need and what resources you might need to succeed in both the working experience and the internship as a learning experience.
Great, thank you so much. Those are definitely be helpful qualities to look for when interviewing and recruiting candidates. If I can turn it over to the interns now. Kat, could you tell us how and where you found your internship and whether it was difficult to find an internship that was remote that you were interested in? And then Maya, if you could follow up with how maybe remote internships opened up new opportunities or created barriers to the process of looking for an internship.
Thank you so much, Sheridan. So I think I found my internship fairly easily, mostly just because I happened upon the posting that Sierra put for the Google Sheet that Kira mentioned earlier, that had a plethora of internships. And so I was able to find internships that I was most interested in. I basically looked for that museum education kind of form and was able to find it fairly easily, but I don't think I would have been able to find it that way if I hadn't happened upon that sheet.
So I had a lot of options opening up when looking kind of at internships for the summer, and those were mostly before everything was turning remote. So I was in a different situation as Kat, where I actually had an in-person internship that was unfortunately canceled. So finding that remote internship was a little bit difficult at first, but I found out about it through Poster House's College Night series and was able to apply through there. But all in all, remote internships opened up a lot of opportunities for me instead of creating barriers. And I think this is the case for many virtual interns this summer. For one thing, I didn't really have to relocate. I was planning on relocating to New York City, which would have been a pretty big burden. And even though it was a paid internship, I really wouldn't have been able to spend any other money besides on rent. So that was really big for me. Being able to stay at my college house and not have to relocate was great. And then in going into projects and working on the actual roles I was in, being remote really offered itself to collaborating maybe a little bit more than I would have in person with my role. I was able to collaborate across a bunch of different departments that I might not have been able to if we were in person, and that was really important to me.
That's great. Thank you so much, Maya and Kat. I'm really glad that Sierra started that spreadsheet so you guys are able to see some more opportunities. So now we're going to shift topics to the onboarding process and how that was transitioned very quickly in many cases from in-person, as Maya said, to virtual. So Daniel, as you went through the process of transitioning to a virtual onboarding, did your interns have any recurring questions that led you to change the process or any orientation materials?
Well, first of all, before I answer this question, I want to give my thanks to Sierra and Kira and the rest of the NYCMER board for having this program as well. I think this is going to be really useful for folks planning fall internships and making sure that it's done in a really ethical, inclusive way. In terms of onboarding, I actually took a bit more of a proactive approach, as did the Institute at large. We made the decision to move to a remote format basically around the time of Governor Cuomo in New York State's stay-at-home order in mid-March. So we didn't wait and see. We decided to go forward with remote internships and all remote programming through the fall, and that's extended now through to the end of the year. So my onboarding process for this program typically begins in May. This year it began in mid-April. I wanted to be intentional with creating a community amongst the cohort and trying to use as many ways as possible, from email chains to getting folks onto our email system a bit earlier so that they had access to materials, to sending out onboarding packets. And then once they started with us, on their first couple of days, I made sure they met with every single department in the organization. Kind of the equivalent in some ways to walking them through the office, or walking them through the vaults, and getting help, letting them get to know everyone. Obviously, the corporeal aspect of that was impossible, but at the very least, in terms of putting faces to names, getting a brief glimpse of all the work that's done at the organization was a real priority of mine. And then lastly, getting, and I think we'll get to this later on, getting everyone online when it comes to our servers, when it comes to our database is needed, and even in terms of physical resources and hardware, making sure they had what they needed in that first week so that they were able to hit the ground running and they wouldn't feel like they're trying to catch up the entire internship. They're able to really learn from it.
Yeah, that's great. And I have a follow-up question. It's slightly connected. So as you guys quickly figured out how to turn the internships from in-person to remote, how did compensation, academic credit, and duration of the internship possibly change or stay the same as you figured out how to make an in-person internship remote? Many people have this question as does the pay structure change? Does the duration change because of all of the Zoom fatigue that people experience? Did you find that any of that needed to change as you made the shift?
So in terms of compensation, that was one of the things that we're really fortunate we were able to keep the same. In terms of hours, in terms of pay. Our interns were funded, 3 of them were funded by a grant that we had over the course of a couple of years, where we were able to pay them $15 an hour, which is New York State minimum wage. So obviously it was nice to pay them a bit more, but even that amount is a huge thing for the field, and more folks should try and get to that level at least when it comes to their interns, if possible. And that was the result. That grant was the result of a lot of diplomatic badgering of my colleagues in our development department, this was an important thing. Our fourth intern in the cohort came to us from a program at Washington College where they were paid a stipend through the college, not through us. So there's always that sort of juggling act of, explaining the intern process and the logistics. But in that regard, we were really fortunate we were able to keep that all the same. The only change was in terms of how hours were distributed during the week, since we had folks that started to be involved on weekend programming, and just the general nature of being at your desk for, we did 6-hour days, 4 days a week. That's not particularly as necessary if there are other programs going on. Tried to keep a consistent schedule, but it wasn't necessarily strictly regimented among the group.
Yeah, that comes back to the flexibility you stressed as an important feature of most internships. Marne, I'd like to go to you now and hear how you planned to accommodate accessibility for your remote internships and how you supported interns in the remote positions, such as including, compensation, but also access to internet, laptops, and perhaps other equipment. I think you're still muted, Marne.
And what I said was riveting, so it's too bad I was muted. Anyway, thank you. I think the accessibility portion is what we best accommodated, just an understanding that the work can be done, any time of day, as long as important meetings are kept. Our internships are unpaid right now, but we are moving toward, there's really a growing feeling of unease about that being the case. So I am definitely a learner as part of this program today too. We just got to the point where staff are, where they're assessing the staff needs for laptops and other equipment. So my hope is that once that gets settled, that we'll be able to say, if you're local and you'd like a laptop, we can arrange for you to borrow one for the duration of your internship. So that's my hope of sort of a second phase of our IT staff obtaining laptops.
Absolutely. And I'd like to hear from the interns as well about what was provided that was particularly useful. Maya, many intern managers have stressed being well prepared for the intern. What did you find most useful to have before the internship started and then as it got underway? And in hindsight, would anything else have been useful to have?
Yeah, so I think that being prepared is a huge measure of success for a remote internship. I had an internship this past spring semester that was suddenly moved online when campuses were shut down, and really didn't have as much of this preparedness just because the world was changing so quickly. But I really found that at Poster House, with Sierra as our coordinator, our process was so smooth in the onboarding process, and we were given really clear instructions on our first day and given like a day-by-day things to do to kind of get us back into all the servers on Google Drive and Google Suite, and really helping us kind of integrate into the Slack that we had, and learning some new tools that the other interns might not have been familiar with, like Trello. And I think with just 4 interns, we were really prepared. We were as prepared as we could be, I think, with the resources we were given. But I think for like larger groups of interns, it's really important to make sure that as you're shifting internships that already existed maybe previously, shifting the job descriptions a lot to encompass more of what the experience will be online, since it can be drastically changed or it can stay the same. But our internships were created as virtual internships from the start, which I think also really helped our onboarding process, since we were made clear on what we would be doing and what materials we would need right away.
Great, I'm glad to hear that. Kat, would you like to add anything to that and maybe speak to some of the specific programs you used? As Maya mentioned, Google Suite and Trello, Slack. Did you use anything else or have access to internal servers that you found useful?
So my internship, we had a part of a VPN that got us remote access to desktops in the museum itself. So that was kind of helpful, so that I could see shared documents between everyone on our team. It was a little slow just because when you're going into something remote, obviously the connection will be different. I'm all the way on the West Coast while it's on the East Coast, or Midwest. So that was challenging, but it gave me access to things that helped me with my work. So having remote access to different things and just sharing our files was very helpful.
Great, I'm glad to hear that worked out. I've had my own troubles with VPN, so I definitely understand. Now I'd like to shift.
If I can build on
Yes,
something
yeah,
that
please,
Kat
Daniel.
mentioned so rightly was, one thing that that I wasn't prepared for initially when it came to an in-person program and had to integrate was the time difference. We had one intern who was based in Pasadena, and making sure that whenever we had professional learning sessions, that it was at a time when it wasn't before she had breakfast, and even making sure that for programs that were going on in the evening that she was assisting on, that her schedule shifted accordingly so that on Pacific time it made sense for her to do the work then. So they had a great point. Thank you, Kat, for that.
Yeah, that's the great potential and potential challenge of remote internships, is they can take place anywhere in the world. So time zones definitely become a bigger issue. So now to shift gears to managing interns, Daniel, could you tell us what kinds of projects and departments you found to be best suited to virtual internships? Were you surprised by anything that worked or didn't work? And how easy was it to convince administrators that the virtual internships were necessary to move forward with, and you guys realized that change had to be made?
Well, a lot of that came from our leadership, actually. In part, it is part of the larger holistic vision for our summer programming. We pivoted to about 300 hours of online digital content, primarily for teachers, but also for K-12 students in the form of an online history school, along with the general public, with programming from Sunday through Friday. So we knew that we would have ample opportunity for learning experiences, both when it came to the content. A couple of the folks as well in our program not only were interested in museology, but were interested in education, K-12 history education, including one who was in a 5-year BA/MAT program. And we were able to integrate them as part of that process as essentially Zoom session assistants. So by the end of it, everyone was great at Zoom in terms of handling both the meeting and webinar formats, answering questions on the fly, and just being excellent when it came to troubleshooting and creating a intentional community online during those sessions. But along with that, they were involved in doing research in our development department. They were connected when it came to preparing materials on our website or editing some teaching resources that were on the back burner. And even when it came to preparing for fall, for example, our traveling exhibitions in places where they could travel, in terms of providing site support notebooks and working with our team to help put those together a bit more. So in terms of the broader communication process, I think it worked extremely well. And I was honestly surprised by how well it worked because of the fact that we were moving to, email and Google Meet, as opposed to being able to tap someone on the shoulder and ask what they're working on and, get advice.
Absolutely, thank you. Kat, I'd like to get your perspective on this question. Did you come up with any insights about what projects were suitable for a remote internship as you went through the process?
So my answer is kind of education focused, since I'm the education intern for mine. And I think what I found kind of suitable to the remote environment was creating lesson plans for people and to use on their own time. But what I found challenging was those programming that was synchronous. So I had a weekly programming with families in the community, but we had very small amounts of people that came to the programming. And I think that's just because people are a little tired of going online constantly on Zoom since they want to kind of on their free time get a little bit of space from technology. So I guess, and then another thing was I found it more challenging to like brainstorm with my team on like different things. And while we were able to like have meetings weekly that helped with that, when you're in person, you can kind of, you know, just roll your chair over to the person and talk about like what you're working on and get any feedback. But in a remote setting, not as possible. You can email someone, but people can get really busy, so it's hard to respond.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big question people have, is how to stay in touch with your intern and make them feel like they're part of the community and the staff. So that leads really nicely to my next question. Marne, as an intern supervisor and mentor, do you have any check-in best practices? For instance, how often did you schedule check-ins? Did you have specific topics to cover during each check-in, and anything else you'd like to speak to?
Yeah, you're right. This is absolutely critical. And as I've been doing these exit interviews that you heard in my intro, I do prolifically. As I'm asking the exiting interns, what's your top tip for the incoming remote interns? And it's be able to keep in communication with your supervisor. So, you know, set up a schedule once or twice a week. Twice a week worked fine for my intern, and she was probably doing about 12 hours a week. And have an agenda, you know, email beforehand so you use your time effectively, and they maybe know what to bring to the meeting or what questions to bring. You could also consider setting up, you know, office hours where you will definitely be available, you know, with an eye on your email or your phone if your intern has some questions. But I also think you should set up less formal types of conversation. You know, when I'm in my building, my intern sits in my office. So there's tons of opportunity for that rapport building and that kind of forming appropriately so a relationship with your intern. And that's much harder, as we're all stating, over Zoom. So I think one time I said, hey, let's just talk. Let's take a little bit more time on this next time we get together. And I want to hear from you. How do you think it's going so far? And we just wound up you know, chit-chatting a little bit too. So you can be intentional about that, because interns need to work on their conversational skills. That's practicing networking, which is important when they, you know, we send them off into the real world. Yeah, okay, I'll stop talking now.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, that's really important to make sure that rapport is built and it's not just really formal, because an internship is kind of a vulnerable position to be in, and you want to make sure there's connection beyond just the professional connection as well. So Maya, I'd like to shift to you now. We've been hearing a lot from the supervisors. Obviously, they're the ones who manage the interns, but managing interns also means managing them and helping them support their goals and completing their goals. So I wanted to know if you had any goals that had to change with the shift to remote, if you found that all your goals could be completed with a remote internship, or anything else you want to add on that vein.
Yeah, so I think my goals for this internship actually pretty much stayed the same throughout the process of either a remote internship, or it could have been the same for an in-person internship. I knew that this was the career path I wanted going into design or marketing for a museum. And my goal overall for the summer, no matter where I found myself, was just to get my foot further in that door as I'm, you know, going into my senior year of college, and kind of getting that experience in a museum setting that would really help me for my future. And I think I was actually, in a way, able to surpass my goals in that way, because like I said before, the collaboration I was able to have between all the different departments and just the collaboration with my other interns, I think lent itself very well to our online setting. And this kind of brings up some of the other things we were talking about, like building that intern community. And I think at Poster House, we had a really great community going, where we had lots of check-ins with our mentors, and then also check-ins weekly with like our cohort, where like we were saying, we kind of made it more fun and had that connection that you kind of want that's more in an office setting, like being able to just walk up to someone and talk to them about their day. So I think a lot of that was self-led through the interns. We all kind of wanted to have a community, so we set up weekly lunches together and did some things that weren't necessarily scheduled by our supervisors, and that was really helpful.
That's great to hear. Yeah, definitely part of the networking of an internship is also networking with your peer interns and building that community that you will probably have if you enter the field together. So that's great to hear. With that, I'd like to move to professional development. Kat, if you can speak to what professional development opportunities were provided in your virtual internship and which were most useful for you, we'd love to hear.
Yes. So I found it useful to be able to attend meetings the director was having with other museum professionals. We had a few meetings just to brainstorm for our own programming, but to partner with other museums that are all over the nation was great professional development moments. I also, this webinar is a great professional development experience. I've never been a panelist in a webinar, so having this experience is great. But I also got to watch a lot of webinars that informed me and what I was creating in my projects, and like having my director recommend all these different kinds of webinars was great for my professional development as a graduate student, but also within as an intern.
It's great to hear. Maya, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, so professional development was actually one of my favorite aspects of interning at Poster House. We had an amazing schedule throughout the summer where we actually had every Tuesday, we would have a conversation surrounding one specific topic. And then on Thursdays, we would have a meet and greet where we would meet a professional in different museum fields that would come in, talk about their journey in their career, their perspective, and then also touch on that professional development topic of the week. And not only was it great to talk about things like interviewing skills or personal marketing and branding, but being able to hear from other professionals in the field, especially as someone who kind of just discovered that I would like to go into the museum industry, was really helpful to learn what other departments are doing. Like I didn't really know much about museum education, and talking to people at different institutions was really, really cool.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you could talk to people from other institutions. I'd like to hear from Daniel and then Marne if you guys used any connections with other institutions or other professional development opportunities for your interns that you think might not have been possible to do in an in-person setting that the remote opens up. Maybe it's something you never had a chance to do this summer, but you're planning for the fall, or any other advice. I think people from small institutions like myself could really benefit from partnering with some outside folks to increase those professional development opportunities for interns. Daniel?
Well, in terms of outside opportunities, actually Maya can speak to it pretty well. We are early on, and I kind of had to bow out on behalf of GLI because we bit off a bit more than we could chew when it came to programming for the internship program and summer at large, part of a bit of a consortium of smaller sites between Gilder, Lehrman, New York Historical Society, Poster House, and Cooper Hewitt, when it came to some larger intern community meet and greets, which a couple of the interns in our cohort attended and found useful. Typically, we aren't as clued into the New York City museum internship landscape, in part because of the fact that while we're chartered by the state as a museum, we primarily exist as a K-12 education organization, more in the nonprofit field. So that was honestly our first connection to that world in an intentional way, even if I wanted to be more involved on it, and unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to do so. But one thing we were able to increase was our internal professional learning opportunities. We have two different sites that are separated by about 35 blocks. So opportunities to connect interns at both of those sites in an in-person format are at a premium. We only used to do once a week intern talk with different staff members, part meet and greet, part career advice. we were able to double that, where we did a total of, I think it was 14 sessions in total. Plus I usually do a session on resume and cover letter writing and finding jobs in the museum field when, you know, it's not a pandemic hellscape. So between all of those opportunities, they've really heard from a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different ways of being in the museum field, not just through education, but also in terms of development, in terms of evaluation, in terms of media production, even in terms of IT. So there are a lot of, you know, it shows that there are a lot of different pathways to careers, pathways to success in the field, and really putting together the building blocks of how to get there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, you and Maya definitely covered that topic very well. So if Marne, I can shift to have you answer another question actually that we have coming into our Q&As. Now that we've covered our big topics, we also have a lot of great questions coming in. And so one from Hillary Cook is, how did you or your mentors promote wellness and self-care within your internships or for your interns?
You know, if I get the sense that my intern, or in checking in, because I'm the overall coordinator of the program as well. So in addition to my own intern, I checked in at least once or twice with all the other interns. We had a total of about 20. And, you know, sometimes you can hear it in their voice, you know, oh, I'm just doing okay today. So trying to be that person who has empathy for, yeah, it's a bummer to be inside all day, or to, you know, all the feelings we're feeling. Do they need to talk? And my own intern, you know, just trying to be that safe spot where they could talk, and pointing out that it's a confidential conversation if they want to feel a little vulnerable, and just to know that, you know, the message we're hearing all over, and yet it still can be comforting. You're not alone. And even I, as your mentor, your supervisor, I feel that way too, you know.
Absolutely, thank you. And now I'd like to ask a question that came up a lot in our registration answers. We asked a couple questions there, and a lot of people were wondering about paying interns and all of the questions that go along with that. As everyone knows, now is a very difficult time in the economy and in the museum field. At a time when a lot of museum staff are losing their jobs or suffering pay cuts, what are the ethics of having unpaid internships and getting that labor for free from interns, maybe that a staff person might have done beforehand? And is there any advice, Daniel and Marne, you guys have for convincing either administrators, or if your administrators are in support, what arguments they themselves use for supporting paying interns, especially in this climate? Daniel, would you like to start, and then we'll go to Marne?
I covered this a little bit earlier when it came to bringing folks on board and in terms of changes in compensation. You know, as I mentioned then, you know, we were thankfully in the place where we already had funds allocated to interns and to paying interns during the summer. That being said, we had a larger cohort planned where some of the funding was going to come from that grant, some from general operations, and the latter portion of it just got removed from the program and reallocated, which honestly made sense. I don't think that having that many interns would have made the most sense for our summer programming in terms of supervision, in terms of making them feel like they were part of the community, part of the team. But that's something that obviously got affected. When it comes to the broader scope of museum staff, full-time staff being on furlough or being laid off in this climate, that's something where, I mean, the sheer survival of institutions is coming into question. So while, of course, the ethical decision is to pay folks for the work they're doing, whether they're interns or whether they're further up in the org chart, you know, I definitely sympathize with folks that are in leadership positions or in board positions when it comes to, do we use our endowment to pay our employees to make sure that, you know, they're still paying the bills and they're still on staff? Or do we use it to pay for interns in addition to that? Or as some institutions have done, we're not going to touch it at all and let the chips fall where they may. But that question is something that's going to be really challenging for institutions over the course of the next few years, realistically.
Marne, would you like to speak to that a bit as well?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I mean, but in our place, we've got about 100 staff. I just think there's a feeling, a sentiment bubbling up that we need to pay our interns. And I've had 2 colleagues say, you know, I really don't think, I'm going to consider not even taking an intern unless they're being paid. So I think top administration is going to get that message. Here in Chicago, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on out there that supports these feelings that we need to think about pipelining and just removing barriers for interns who otherwise might not be able to join us if it wasn't a paid experience.
Absolutely, yeah. The remote internships open up, you know, the possibility of people being able to participate in an internship when they otherwise might not have been able to due to the cost of travel or housing, as our interns both mentioned. And paying as part of that, having a paid remote internship opens it up even more to people who may not be able to participate otherwise, and therefore increase the diversity of our field. You know, we want as many people to participate as possible. So that leads me into another question that one of our attendees is asking. Rachel is asking, it's very topical as well. This past summer, many museum staffers expressed discomfort with leadership and wanted more accountability from their institutions regarding racism and inequity within the field. What was it like to discuss this with interns this summer? And so I'd like to hear actually from the interns first, whether this was a question on their minds, whether they brought it up with their supervisors or whether their supervisors brought it up with them, and how it felt for them to be entering this field at a time when all of these questions are swirling around. So if we could start with Kat and then go to Maya, that would be great.
I'm glad this question was brought up. And what was another great thing about my internship, although I was the education intern, I felt I helped a lot also with the social justice that was started in our organization. And in response to everything that was going on, one of my colleague interns mentioned we need to do something about this. And so we created a community committee to kind of approach this discussion, and it made it open for our whole team to have discussions around this. And what was great is I have a good background having these kinds of discussions, so I was happy to bring that along. My program provides a lot of education around it, so I was able to bring the tools I've been given in this program to my internship, and it was very welcome during my internship to talk about equity and how we will try to make those changes within our program, and we're continuing to do it. Although I'm done with my internship, I will be continuing to have those discussions on the committee we've created and as a committee member from now on.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Kat. Maya?
Yeah, so similar to Kat's experience, I think that my institution did a really great job addressing this, and also within our meet and greets, hearing from other individuals in their fields was also really, I think, beneficial, and bring up these conversations that, especially as someone that recently discovered the museum field, I might not have had as much knowledge on without this experience. And then also in the greater picture, I was really lucky that at Poster House, I joined at a time when so much is happening in our world, and that Poster House decided to address a lot of things by having a diversity book club, and kind of being thrown in on my first week into reading the books that you want to talk about race was just a huge opportunity, and I think speaks a ton for my experience there, and being integrated fully into the staff and being able to have those really hard discussions without ever having met any of the employees there was definitely a little scary, but just gave me a lot more faith in the institution as a whole and working for them.
That's so great to hear. That's really cool, Maya. Thank you. So part of that book club, it sounds like, was discussing these difficult topics, but also getting closer to the institution and getting to know everybody through that facilitated discussion. So a lot of people have been wondering how a sense of camaraderie is created among the staff, among the interns, and some of our interns have spoken about this and said how the interns all kind of hang out together and things like that. Daniel, did you facilitate any sort of community building, I guess, for lack of a better word, among the interns? Or what does it look like from a supervisor's perspective if the interns look like they're not really forming those group lunches on their own?
That was something that I had to really get creative with because of the fact that they weren't all in one place. And actually talking with one of the alumni of our intern program and just to check in, they noted that they had their own intern bench in Central Park where they'd meet up for lunch every so often. And obviously we couldn't do that at all this year. But that's where the varieties of check-ins came into play. And Marne touched on that earlier, where along with doing some one-on-one check-ins, where, talking not only about how folks are doing in their projects and what resources they might need, but also talking about like what's communication like when it comes to your campus for the fall term? How are you feeling about this? A lot of folks were working on their theses as well, and we were talking about their research that was going on before they began writing their thesis. But also doing group check-ins where it's a little bit more informal. Talking about, okay, how are things going in your work, but also in life, but also, what movies are you watching? How are you engaging with events in your community? And, in that way, the only thing that I wish we could have done is doing more of those. Honestly, the time frame of the internship was only 8 weeks, and they were working on so many different projects that it didn't necessarily allow for those group check-ins more than once every week and a half or so. But that was really helpful when it came to making them feel like part of the team, if not fully creating that sense of intra-cohort camaraderie.
Absolutely, yeah, it sounds really useful. Yeah, Marne, do you want to speak to that?
Well, just to add on to that, we used a Google Classroom, which I have a colleague who sort of coached me on how to do it. And then I have an 18-year-old daughter who's been home this summer, and she also gets credit for helping me figure that out. But so we posted a couple of conversation starter questions. We asked for the interns to put a short video or a little paragraph about themselves early on in the summer. And coincidentally, we did a members open house in early June. And so a lot of staff recorded videos of a tour of the stacks or the history of pandemics in Chicago. So I was able to add all those videos. It was really a wonderful coincidence. I wish I'd used it more to, more thought prompts or what are you binge watching? I did post that one. That was a fun one to see the answers. And then another question I posted was to staff, what are your blogs, your books, your professional groups that inspire you, that, you'd recommend to this group of emerging professionals. So I posted that too, but I want to have even more fun with it moving forward.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of great ways that people can really get to know each other and establish some connection beyond just the professional development. So as we reach 3 p.m. now, I'd like to just wrap up our conversation. If I can hear parting thoughts from all of our panelists, but in particular from Maya and Kat, I'm wondering if you guys would be open to doing future remote internships, or what you guys would say to other people in either your cohort or undergrads you may know younger than you who are apprehensive about a remote internship. What advice would you give them, or what are you thinking in terms of that, in addition to whatever wrap-up thoughts you'd like to share with us? Maya, if you want to go first, and then Kat.
Yeah, so I thought a lot about doing another remote internship just because my experience was so wonderful this summer, but I also kind of have come to the conclusion with one semester left of school that I need to start looking for a job, which is scary in itself. But yeah, I think that right now it's a really amazing opportunity. And like I said before about kind of having access to museums all across the country, no matter where you are, if you're on your college campus or if you're staying at home, I think that that can be really beneficial to students, especially those that might not be able to get a job off campus or on campus anymore with work study, and offering these remote paid internships, I think can be really helpful to fill that. And yeah, I think that it just opens up a huge door to people. So I would recommend it to anyone. I personally am ready to kind of move into the real world, but I can't speak enough for my experience.
As a student who will be a student for the next year, I would definitely do another remote internship. I live in a community where a lot of the internships in general were just canceled. So I kind of need to look for remote internships to get more experience. But I would also recommend it because I think it created more connections that around the country and could even create connections globally, who knows, and created more sense of a wider community to have discussions with. So I loved it.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Kat and Maya. Daniel and then Marne, would you like to share any final parting words or of advice or otherwise?
Well, much like Kat mentioned, the biggest benefit to this format was that it really opened up how, which students would be able to apply and participate. It levels the playing field as well. And when it comes to, if you don't have the ability to relocate to New York or to LA or DC, you're still able to, work alongside professionals in the field at a wider variety of institutions, and build that professional skill set, build that professional network in a way that would otherwise be, really difficult for a lot of folks socioeconomically, geographically across the country. So that's something where I think that we're looking at this as a new paradigm instead of just a patchwork for the summer.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of the elements of remote internship will be here to stay, even after things start to open up and get, more back to normal. So we are building our skills for engaging interns, and then the participants, the interns, they're learning how to interact with supervisors, with peers, with colleagues digitally, and they're learning about the challenges and the advantages. So it's been a lovely surprise that we've had some success. There have been bumps, but we've also had some successes, I feel, this summer by all means.
Great to hear. Thank you all so much, Maya, Kat, Daniel, and Marne. I know myself, I learned a lot during this webinar, and I hope all of our registrants did too. The recording will be sent out to registrants, and any unanswered questions we'll try and answer as well in a follow-up email. So thank you all again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.